Good to see you. Thank you very much for joining us. For those of you that don't know Andrew, both him and his brother are heavily involved in the industry, or his family are heavily involved in the industry. I've posted quite a few fun pictures. I know a number of you, Gary, I had an opportunity to go out and I guess participate, sit and watch a harvest, which was pretty exciting. But Andrew, I'll let you take it from here. Again, everybody else stay on mute while you're not asking questions. Feel free to raise your hands if you do have questions. And Andrew, go ahead.
Okay, well, great. Thank you for having me, Mandy. What I wanted to talk to everybody about today was what we did this year in terms of field trials and what we're looking for from a results standpoint. And thank you for giving me the time today, Mandy, to do this. I'm going to share my screen here. Clicked the wrong button immediately. Oh, you disabled participant screen sharing.
Oh, just kidding.
Yeah.
Okay,
Andrew, you're a little low on volume.
Am I? Yeah, let's see here. Turn my volume gain up here. Is that a little bit better?
Good. And Bob, real quick, Andrew and Bob, I'm going to make you a host. For some reason, my computer every once in a while freezes when we get a lot of people on Zoom. And so just so they don't hang up on anybody again, I'm going to make you guys the host as well, just as a heads up. So if I log off, that's why.
Okay, well, thank you, Mandy.
Okay.
Okay, well, can we see my screen?
Yeah, looks great.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, it's got your fancy little logo up there. We love that. My name is Andrew Bish. I work for a couple companies, and I serve as the founder of the Nebraska Hemp Industries Association, and I also serve on the boards of the Colorado Hemp Industries Association, or the Colorado Hemp Association now, the Hemp Feed Coalition, and the Standing Committee of Hemp Organizations. Bish Enterprises and Hemp Harvest Works are the companies that I typically spend most of my time operating. And then I participate in a couple other organizations known as Tanja and Global Fiber. Some of the field trial sponsors for this year, those that contributed funds and time to help us were Bish Enterprises, Hemp Harvest Works, Tanja, Global Fiber, South Bend Hemp, Canavision, and special thanks to all the farmers and landowners that donated their land, time, and consideration. So what was our objective? Our objective this year was to identify some suitable hemp varieties for the purpose of growing fiber production across multiple states. And this is, again, purpose-grown fiber. So this was not a grain and fiber trial. This was a very heavy fiber trial. Our second objective was to determine some of the best time periods to plant these hemp varieties to achieve optimal performance. And then finally, goal C was to quantify market opportunities for these varieties by analyzing the herd content, as well as the fiber content and the fiber strength. What we did was we planted 6 foot by 25 foot rectangles, which are ultimately 0.34% of an acre. And then we replicated this 4 times for each location and planting date. And we had 2 planting dates per location, planted plus or minus 30 days apart based on weather in the specific area. This is an example of what the map looked like, and this also will show what the varieties were that we were experimenting with this year. So we were working with a variety called A2, which came out of Colorado. And then we imported Carmagnola from Italy, the Futura 75, the Fibrer 79, and the Felina 32 were all imported from France. The Jinma and the Yuma at the bottom were actually Chinese imports. X59 came out of Montana, and then the MS77 came to us via Gary Sykes, but ultimately through Australia. Let's see. And this is the grid to give you an idea of what the layout would look like. So each one of these little squares would be a variety, and then we would plant that variety 4 different times in every single plot. And this is what that looked like here. So this is an example of a research plot planter. And this particular planter came to us from South Bend Hemp. Really appreciate Melissa's help with this project. What we see there is a person writing on the back of the planter. And they have little bags of seed that have been pre-measured. We're working with 50 pounds per acre. And that seed is going down. Let me turn my volume down here. Going into the machine and then going into the ground. And again, the 50 pounds per acre was the measurement that we were targeting here. And we basically used a little scale to get all of this set up. Our next video is actually going to show you what it looked like going into the cedar.
Andrew,
Again, yes.
real quick, there was a question. Can you repeat where you guys planted these? Or are you going to share that here in a little bit?
Yeah, did I skip over that? Let's see here. Oh my gosh, I think I deleted that slide out of here. Okay, let me just recite where it was. And let me back up to where I was here. Okay, apologize for that. So where was it that we were where was it that we were planning? So we had 3 different sites in Nebraska. That was Alliance, Nebraska. We have Giltner, Nebraska, which is Central Nebraska location. Alliance would be Western Nebraska, and then an Eastern Nebraska location in Plattsmouth. We had a location in Fairmont, Minnesota, as well as Fairfield, Iowa. Then we had a location in Bailey, Texas. We also had one just south of Dallas, Texas. And we also did a plot in South Carolina, as well as Bend, Oregon. And those were the geographic locations that we were able to cover this particular season. We also did have seed and worked in collaboration with a number of research organizations, such as Cornell, Texas A&M, University of Illinois, Champaign, to name a few. We also worked with the University of New Orleans to provide seed to all of those organizations for research purposes on fiber specifically this year. Great question. Sorry, I apologize for getting rid of that.
That's what happens when we do the same presentation over and over again.
Yeah.
I always forget how much I've said and what hasn't been said. And yeah, I get it.
Or I get excited and press the delete button when I should.
That's right. We'll speed this up.
Yeah. So this is what it looks like from the top down to give you an idea. It's a pretty neat device here in which the pre-measured seed goes into this funnel. And then this rotational device distributes it down into the planter appropriately. And you can put a batch in ahead so that when this one runs out, you just tap a button on the ground and then you can load your next seed in and then just keep trucking through the field. Worked really, really slick.
Tony has a good question. 50 pounds of seed, whoops, it just hid there. Says 50 pounds of seed rate was maintained across the varieties regardless of seed size or mass.
Correct, except for the MS-77, which we planted it in a 75 pounds per acre because we knew in advance we had some germination issues. Yeah, there are different size seeds, X59 being the largest seed that we saw of any of them. And you could have seeds ranging from 22,000 seeds, potentially up to 32,000 seeds per pound, depending on what that variety is. The way that we happen to measure this out, yes, was on a 50 pound per acre basis across all seed.
Cool.
This is some drone footage, just to give another perspective. I'm a machinery guy, so I like to see the machines in any angle that I can get. So this is just a top view. And again, what you see there is the staking is the marking out of each individual plot. So every time we've put in a different variety, we're staking it, and that's got the information about the plant itself. You'll see some pictures later when I show some of the results of what these field trials look like visually. Most of the work there was done by my brother on the back of the cedar and my 13-year-old daughter. another view of just what the field looked like. This was a really pretty location. Actually, used to be a hop yard, and they grew hemp on this particular plot last year, but it was a CBD variety that they grew last year. This was the machine that we used again with the tractor. So you can see kind of just how we hauled everything around the country, going from location to location. This was a special imported tractor, actually, that had a very narrow wheelbase designed for hops production. Happened to work fantastic because it fit on a car trailer, went behind the pickup really, really easily. Oh, this is the locations. I just completely moved the slide. Okay, well, yeah, here we go. So Alliance, Nebraska, Giltner, Plattsmouth, Fairmont, Fairfield, Meridian, Texas, Muleshoe, Texas, which is right beside Bailey, Bend, Oregon, and Weddington, North Carolina. And then the universities that we work with were listed there as well. And this is a map to give you an idea of where all the seed that we imported this year or donated or planted ourselves went to. So we had quite a few locations that we were working with and got a pretty fair sampling.
Here's a question real quick about planting versus tilling. Oh, yes, this is all no drill. Never mind. Melissa answered it.
Oh yeah, so yeah, everything was we used a no-till drill.
No till. Yep.
Worked out really well. Some of the area that we were working in, the soil was tilled. Some of the areas we were working in, the soil was not tilled. And then we had some areas that we had a cover crop as well. So there was a variety of conditions that we worked with, but we used the same no-till drill consistently. Here's let me move this block down. So here's some of what the varieties look like. And we're going to take a contrast. I've got two different sites. We're still working on putting together all of our data and finalizing it this year, but I've got two different sites in contrast to show you. This will be Plattsmouth, Nebraska, and then I'll show you Bailey, Texas. One of the things that I mentioned was we had two different planting cycles, and ideally our original goal was to identify, if you remember from the beginning, goal B was to identify the best time of year to plant. And while I don't know that we were able to achieve that directly, we did identify what we believe is starting to be too late to plant. Unfortunately, due to some importation issues, we ran into a delay and we're not able to get to our first planting. So our first planting didn't actually end up until the last part of May, going into the first week of June. And so the second planting would have been at the end of June, going into the beginning of July. In Plattsmouth, Nebraska, these photos are all going to be showing the first planting. So this is the A2 variety in Plattsmouth. Fairly uniform in general. We saw good germination across most of the areas that we planted A2. And then when you compare it with Texas, it was planted right at a similar time. You can see just a dramatic difference in growth, which most of what we attribute to this is going to be sunlight conditions between the two of those. But there definitely were some water differences between Plattsmouth, but we did see similar results to Plattsmouth with some of these varieties in Alliance that also received very little water over the course of the year. The main difference we saw between Texas and the other dryland areas was the amount of sunlight. If we take a look at the Carmagnola, this was a really good contender in terms of quality of plant, very consistent. Pretty much regardless of where we planted it, the plant was consistent. Now, some areas obviously it had more tonnage than others, and then when you look at how it performed as we got further south, it definitely struggled. Again, the late planting based on what we saw just made things very, very difficult for the plant to get growing the way that it should have been. We saw a lot of weed pressure coming in as a result of the late season planting. The Futura 75, here's it in Plattsmouth. One of the nice things about the Futura, pretty much every single stalk of the Futura was identical to the next. These were very slender with The leaf structure was very solid. We saw a fair amount of seed, and again, very consistent plant. And then when we went into Texas, we had fair germination, but again, we just had a tough time getting some growth out of the plant. Again, speculating on the daylight, and you'll see some examples of some things that performed okay, which lend to our suspicions there. Here's the Fibroir 79, very similar to the Futura 75. Again, had some struggles when we go into Texas. The Felina 32 was a fair performer. I don't think we saw as good a consistency between the Felina 32 as we did the Fibroir 79 or the Futura 75, but a pretty stable plant nonetheless. And again, some real tough issues in terms of just growing down there in Texas. However, when we get to the Yuma, in Plattsmouth, it did really phenomenal in terms of tonnage. Our current estimates are showing about 3.5 to 5 ton per acre on the Yuma, but you'll see some challenges in some photos that I've got upcoming with what that means. When we went into Texas with the Yuma, even though we planted at the same time of all the other plants, the Yuma, the Jinma tend to do better in situations where they have a longer form of daylight, shorter form of daylight, as Texas happened to have during this time of year, and did perform considerably better than the French varieties or the Italian varieties or the American varieties that we put in. The X59. X59 was an interesting crop. You'll see this in Plattsmouth. Grew very, very consistently. Did not get over 6 feet tall anywhere that we grew it, and really had a tough time south of Minnesota. This is an example of it in Texas. You can see like the one spindly little plant that we actually had to put beside the sign down there in Texas. Ultimately, the X59 started flowering in any of the southerly latitudes. I would say, again, below the Minnesota border, we saw flowering as early as 2 weeks after planting, which was pretty phenomenal to see a plant come out of the ground and then go immediately into its flowering stage. And that's ultimately what we saw with it in Texas. Although as we got into Minnesota, we saw very good conditions with that, where like I said, the plant actually got up to 6 feet tall in some areas, and still working on what exactly the fiber content looked like, because we did not grow for seed. The MS77, similar to the Yuma, was a fair contender. We did have some germination issues, like I mentioned early on, but the plant itself was fairly hardy and responsive to the daylight conditions that we experienced. And those would be some of the pictures of what the contrast looks like. So I've got, we're going to take a quick look at what we did next, which was our measuring. We did a hand harvesting, bundling, and infield redding to quantify the height at the time of harvest and the yield per acre. I've got just a couple perspective photos of people near the plants. So these are my children near the plants to give you an idea of how tall the field was. This is one in Plattsmouth, Nebraska. This is next to a car. And then this is when we look at the stock. So this is some of the Yuma
it's
varieties.
Not changing. Oh, here you go. Now it did.
Okay. So can you see the stalks now?
Yes.
So this is some of the Yuma varieties and the Jinma varieties, and we saw exceptional growth in terms of stock. Both plants germinated very well. We saw north of 90% germination on both plants. But the stock size is phenomenal, and not phenomenal in a good way, I would say. It leads to a very big stick. You can see this one on the left is up to 3 inches thick, and the one on the right 2 inches. And both of these were in dry land, so they did not receive any irrigation during the season. at all. This is just how it happened to perform in southeast Nebraska. This would tell me that we need to do more research on this plant specifically if we're going to find it effective in that particular part of the country, because trying to break down a stock of this size can be very, very burdensome. Trying to bale a stock of this size is very difficult. And the standard sickle guard is about 2 3/4 inches wide, which means that the stock on the left physically could not be cut with a standard sickle if you were to try to mow it down with some sort of sickle mower. And some sickles are even smaller than that, but very, very big, big stalks. And then when you look at, and I don't have some great photos here of some of the French varieties, you would see stalks that are all under 1 inch, a lot of those being 1/2 to 3/4 inch, and then being just very, very uniform in nature.
Can you, real quick, Perky had a really good question. What's the ideal diameter of the stalk? And I know that's a pretty broad question, but from your perspective, what are you seeing as far as both harvest and end use?
So that's one of the reasons that we're doing some of our fiber herd separation. I don't have a good answer for you right now. Hopefully I'll have by the end of the month a better answer on that particular question. What we want to identify is we're trying to see if there is and what kind of correlation the stock has with the mixture of herd and fiber. So it appears initially that thicker stocks tend to have more herd and less fiber on a percentage basis. But that's one of the things that we're purposely trying to measure to see if that actually plays out true between these varieties. And then one of the other aspects is going to be, again, how to deal with some of this material, because the thicker stocks, the very, very thick herd doesn't seem to have a lot of application in the marketplace right now. And so that herd would have to be broken down further. And it seems as if there's a lot more mechanical application that needs to take place when you get a thicker stock in order to actually process that, and trying to look and see what the viability of that is. So I don't know that I know the answer to that question exactly, but it is something that hopefully some of our research will lead to giving more information about.
What was the density on those large stalks?
I do not have a measurement on that at this point.
And then did you see those large stalks consistently throughout the plot, or it was just a few individuals within that plot?
So the Chinese varieties actually grew fairly consistently. So not the 3 inch was an outlier, but the 2 inch was a norm in that particular variety. Yeah, so the 2 inch was a norm, the 3 inch was an outlier, and I would say smaller than 2 inch was an outlier in that particular plot.
So maybe the 3 inch on the edge, and the 2 inch consistently throughout the rest.
Yeah, and actually that 3 inch stock was on the very end row. So yeah, that did happen to be a very end row plant. Cool. So this is how we stack these up for infield ready. And then ultimately we allowed this to sit out in the field for approximately 30 days, again, weather dependent. And then we put all of these in a trailer, and either some of the fields, we actually did some infield decortication. Some of the material was transported to the decorticator itself. This is how we cut down the rest of the field. A lot of these fields had hemp growing around it. This was 50 acres in Alliance, and this is the Futura 75 variety in a larger field. So this is happened to be an irrigated plot in Alliance, Nebraska. And again, a really, really consistent plant there. It cut really well, it laid really well, it baled really well. Our tonnage was low. We were 2 to 3 ton per acre on this irrigated field in Alliance. So what's next is we're trying to decorticate this, like I said, and we're measuring out the fiber content, the herd content percentage, and what that fiber tensile strength looks like, because we think that that's going to be an interesting measurement. This is the piece of equipment that we're using to give you an idea of how we're doing it. This is an actual video of us decorticating. This is a little machine that we put together in collaboration with Formation Ag to basically do consistent research. So it's a roller breaker system. It's got 2 rollers, and you hand feed the stalks in for the herd fiber separation. And this is what it looks like if you're hand feeding that. This is not the type of machine that I would use if you were doing something like a small acreage. People have asked me, I've got 10 acres. Can I decorticate with this machine? I guess you could. You'll be out there most of the year, I think. It's not designed for that. So this is not a commercial machine. This worked very, very well for our application, though. However, again, when you go into the some of those larger varieties where we had 2-inch diameter stalks or more, we actually were unable to use the machine. The machine was just simply too weak to break the stalks, which it was frustrating to see, but it was not unexpected. So why does any of this matter? And why were we doing any of this? A couple different reasons. So when you look at the market pricing right now, hemp seed grain is going from 50 to 55 cents a pound, with organic ranging from $1.05 to $1.15, and raw stock coming in anywhere from $120 to $200 a ton. Hemp fiber is going for about $125 to $3 a pound for first clean fiber. And then cleaned herd, depending on volume, could range somewhere between 36 and 66 cents a pound, again, depending on volume. This is what clean fiber looks like: medium herd, small herd, milled herd, hemp seed grain, and whole hemp seed look like. Those are ultimately, there's different commodities. And when you look at the price per ton out there, measuring what the tonnage looks like, this is how it's going to impact the farmer. So if your input cost is the same, and we're using some numbers off of some fields that we were able to work with this year, and you've got a $239 input cost on a per acre basis, and you get 2 tons per acre, and we work off a price per ton of fiber of $150, that's $300 in gross revenue per acre, but only $61 in net revenue. However, if that same farmer is able to grow a variety that they're able to double that tonnage, so they end up with 4 tons or even 5 tons per acre, that net revenue goes up quite significantly to $361 or $511 respectively. And when you're looking at how do we make the economics of this work, one of the most important aspects is to make sure that every piece of the chain, people are being paid appropriately, and that beginning piece with the farmer is very, very important. We want those farmers to be able to grow, to be able to grow the following year, and then grow the year after that. And the only way that they're going to be able to do that is by being profitable. So that was one of the main reasons for the seed trials, was to just help us with tonnage data so that we can go to a farmer and help them understand what the potential revenue on a per acre basis look like. In addition to that, as a machinery manufacturer, obviously, I have a vested interest in standardizing items, so identifying better crops that are easier to harvest, also drive down the cost of production for producers, because there can be equipment that can work in a variety of circumstances rather than specialty equipment, which again just drives up the cost of production. When you're looking, at how these things are harvested, this is just a grain harvest, and I'll show you some of the larger scale fiber harvests from this year. And this is a field out in Montana, and this is an example of what sickle cutting looks like. So this particular machine has 3 sickles, and again, those guards are 2 3/4 inches. So if you tried to feed a 3-inch plant through there, this wouldn't work very well. These plants happen to have about a 3/4 inch stalk, and we're running through that between 7 and 9 miles an hour. This is enough to learn to mute videos. This is down in South Carolina. Gentleman that I know named Gary Sykes happened to have this field. That prior field was from I&D Hemp out in Montana, but this is a field that Gary Sykes worked with the producer in South Carolina to grow. This was a MS-77 variety. This was a very, very tall, very, very tall plant. This happened to be the field that you were at, Mandy. And this is just a view from behind the tractor if you're curious what, again, I like watching machinery videos, so I apologize if I'm showing too many of those.
I think it's great, especially there aren't very many people on here that have seen this and seen the harvest, so I think it's great.
Yeah, it's kind of soothing actually to watch plants fall and cascade in the way that they do. So this particular machine is highly dependent on field speed. So if you're going too slow, plants don't cascade as well as if you're moving faster, they start to cascade. And then if you're a bad driver, like you can see right there, you'll run over your plants. So got to be a good driver. And then this is actually, as we continue to work towards standardization, we'll start to see multi-crop harvesting become more popular in the United States. Again, as we learn more about the variety. This happens to be that X59 variety. And this is an example of a multi-crop harvest that was going on. This is a header that we worked with Formation Ag to produce, as well as a cart that's vacuuming the green material out of the back of the combine. Really liked this combine, worked really well. This was what they call a conventional combine. It did not have a rotor. And we were able to connect into the chaff area and ultimately suck the material, the green material, a large percentage of that out the back of the combine. The stalks fell out of the combine very well. And then this particular group was going to pelletize it and feed it to their cattle, which they happen to be an Indian tribe and they're using it on the reservation, and they can do that. I will warn people that you can't feed it to animals in the United States and then let that animal enter the stream of commerce. But for the Indian tribe, they're experimenting with this, and really, really unique idea. So I'm sure Mandy's talked about current market players in grain and fiber, so I'm not going to go into that.
You can. I love giving these guys a shout out.
Okay, well, great.
Yeah.
Some of the top players in grain are going to be I&D Hemp out there in Montana, Healthy Oil Seeds, Roger Gushis there in North Dakota, and Victory Hemp out there in Kentucky. And then South Bend Industrial Hemp doing a great job on the fiber production. I&D Hemp just started their processing line. They've been doing some testing and are ready to run here. And then Global Fiber has been doing fiber processing for the last few months as well. And this is just a definition of decortication, which I will just skip past this real quick. So from here, obviously, there's a lot of places that we're going to go, whether it be textiles, human consumption, animal feed. For everyone that's not aware, again, it's not legal in the United States yet. We got to work with the FDA to get that legalized. If you want to know more about that, please check out what the Hemp Feed Coalition is doing at hempfeedcoalition.org. Biofuels are an option. Building materials, plastic alternatives, chemical cleanup, which still needs a lot of study, and paper. There's some great companies already making products that fit those categories. So now, if there's any more questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I will go ahead and get rid of my video. Great, screen sharing is stopped.
Awesome. There were a couple of questions, and I think I know an answer around this, but of course, wondering about samples during the cycle to see if shift in fiber lignin herd ratios as it grows. And then would any varieties cut early or very early be herdless enough to process without decortication? And I guess my question to that is, as I've watched you guys, I know Rusty and Melissa and you guys posted different pictures as we watched the crop develop and how weak the fiber itself was before the herd was developed, that you could just rip it apart compared to once it's been more mature, once it's grown a little while. So I don't know if you have anything you want to, or anything to add to that.
Yeah, I don't have any specifics. We didn't actually do any of that type of testing, and I think that that's a great question and something that we should definitely look at in future tests. Our process this particular cycle, mainly just due to resources, was to collect it one time. We just simply didn't have the resources to go as many places as we did. And do that many samples, but I think that that's an excellent suggestion. And I do believe that we're not going to see the same result as if we cut it at day 70 as day 60 and day 50. I just don't know what that result looks like.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely what we're going to start seeing as, you guys progress and build on your research. And I know there's a number of you that have done this, and so I'm excited to see that continue. Tony, did you have something you wanted to jump in and add?
Oh, yeah. Forgive me if I missed this detail. The harvest date or like, was there a uniform kind of decided upon days after planting to harvest, or was it kind of like once you saw the plant start to flower, you cut because you were going for a fiber only? Like how was that decided?
Our target window was between day 75 and day 85. And we basically looked at what a midpoint is from data that we saw from some of the French varieties in terms of recommended harvest dates on varietals, and picked a number and then cut the entire field at one time. Again, due to the geography and the wide range of area that we were working with, we didn't have the ability to go back multiple times. So we picked a 10-day window and tried to stick to that.
Were there any varieties that were not flowering yet by the time you start cutting?
Yeah, so that's interesting. It really depended on where the plants were grown. So the further south, the more flowering we saw. The further north, the less flowering we saw. And I don't have those exact results yet, but as soon as we publish that report, I will have more of that data. I do believe that in Minnesota, that only the X59 was flowering at the time that we cut that in the Minnesota plot. But I'll have more data on that as we get that finalized here.
So just making sure I'm doing the math right. If it was 75 days after late May, this was mostly like first week of August or so. Am I doing the math right there?
Yeah. We saw harvesting going into starting at about the end of the first week of August and through the third week of August.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Good questions. Go ahead, Daniela. You're on the spot. You're in the hot seat now, Andrew. Everybody chime in.
Thank you very much, Andrew, for the presentation. I am part of the Cornell extension, so I know of the varieties that you're growing. I'm processing the data right now. I would like to know about these varieties that you are talking about. Are they monoecious, dioecious, and whether you have information on the difference in fiber, all of these different metrics in between males, females, and if there were monoecious between the monoecious individuals?
Great question. So there's a variety there was a combination of both. We had monoecious and dioecious plants in there, and in our tonnage estimates, our initial tonnage estimates are based on biomass that we cut out 3 foot by 3 foot plots and measured the entirety of that biomass after retting is how we measured that. So that would include both male and female plants. And then the decortication, we're still working on the decortication, so I don't have any of that to share with you yet.
Okay, anybody else have any questions or anything else that they'd like to add? Karen, I saw you had mentioned something. Karen was wondering what type of technology or use for processing those Chinese varieties that got so big here in the US. And I'm assuming that the Chinese varieties are planted so dense and harvested at a young age. Are they getting obviously smaller stalks than we are? And what are they using to process?
So that's a good question. I don't really know exactly how all of the farming practices that they're doing over in China to deal with these. I've got to think that harvesting them earlier would lead to definitely a different result in terms of its ability to process. I just don't know the answer to that actually. I can tell you, yeah, I can tell you that it seems like the larger stocks lend themselves more to hammer milling activity than roller breaking activity though. And roller breakers on those larger stocks, I don't think is a technology that's going to be extremely effective, and looking at something else will be. But again, what does the cost of that machinery look like? The cost to run it, and is that on a dollar per dollar standpoint, does it make sense to grow those bigger stocks, or does it make sense to grow a smaller stock? Those are the questions that we're trying to assist with answering.
Awesome. Okay, so there's all kinds of questions here, and before I dive into a carbon question, let's get to these people up here. But Tony, go ahead one more time, and then Rudy, and then Zev.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, because you said the largest seed you guys had was the X59, right? Not the UMA.
I guess I could go back and look at some pictures, but and maybe I'm wrong, but I just was thinking in my head that the X59 was one of the larger seeds that there were.
The part of the reason I mention it is because I know there's like a Yuma from China, and there's also this Yuma from Colorado. And I think,
the Yuma crossbow.
yeah, they've been mixed up, but also just want to make sure, like, if we got the same Yuma, because this is the Yuma that I grew this year from China. It has, it's 2 to 3 times by mass than any European hemp seed I've seen, including the X59 that I got my hands on this year. But I think that could also be part of the reason why you're seeing large stalks on the Chinese varieties, because if you planted a standard 50 pounds per acre, with this size seed, you're going to end up with way less plants per acre. So
yeah, and that was actually one of my largest concerns about the Chinese variety, was whether knowing if the variety we were getting was actually the variety that it was supposed to be. And I don't have a good metric on that. I can tell you that the paperwork on this particular variety claims it to be the Yuma, not the Yuma crossbow. But I would be interested in comparing. It's going to sound funny, but I'd like to compare your seed versus my seed and see what size the differences between those. I think that's interesting.
We can connect offline and tell you about what we did in California this year over in Lemoore. Interesting season. But the last question I'll ask you was, what do you think, at market maturity would be a fair price point for planting seed per acre, like as a part of the cost basis that could be, financially sustainable for the farmer and for the entire supply chain downstream of them?
Yeah, so to me, that question has a lot to do with what the output is. So if price per ton is 150 to 200, and a farmer's able to get 4 to 6 tons, even down to 3 ton, I think we should be looking at $3.50 or lower on a per pound basis for seed. I get nervous when we're spending above $4. I think that starts to get a little bit too expensive. So I would say below 350 would be a target price point for some sort of volume. And if you're doing heavy volume, probably possibly even under 3.
Would the target there be to plant like 1 million seeds per acre?
Oh, I'd have to do the math on that. And again, I don't know. So the reason I don't know is I did notice we got to figure out where those break evens are with some of these varieties. So as you plant denser and denser, what I learned this year is that the plant doesn't necessarily get smaller and more slender. What happens is some of the plants kill off the other plants. And then you end up with still big plants. So I'm not, we need to understand what those break-even points are on those varietals.
Got it. Understood. Yeah, thank you.
Rudy, go ahead. Good questions. Tony.
Hey, Andrew, looking at on the baling portion of your varieties there, are you guys ever used like a cultipacker or had any kind of problems baling it? You know, if it's actually too thick?
No, we did not grow any amount of any of the larger stocks. And the places that the stocks performed really well happened to be in states where we committed to destroying the material. So we didn't actually have to do THC testing by the state, although we did THC testing on all the varieties. We just didn't do them according to state rules most of the time. So the only thing that we baled were the French varieties, and we used a traditional baler. Round baler did not have really any issues with that. I would expect that we'd have tremendous issues baling some of these larger stocks, and no, I've not used a cultipacker to be frank.
Thank you, sir.
Dev, go ahead, sir. It's good to see you.
Thank you. And Andrew, good to see you. Thank you so much for everything you are doing. The presentation was great. I'm multitasking a little bit, but I definitely appreciated seeing what you did. My question is, I am in conversation with a couple of groups in Mexico, and they're at about 20 degrees latitude. And I'm wondering if you have any input on varieties that you think would grow. And these would be fiber and herd varieties down in Mexico.
Yeah, I just saw a note come up about subtropical hemp varieties from China. I do think either looking at Ecofiber's MS77 as a potential option, even though that's just a really thick plant. I do think those subtropical plants from China, looking at more Chinese varieties is where we have to go. I don't have any specifics though. We're actually conducting a trial plot in collaboration with Canavision in Puerto Rico in January, and trying to learn some of that. This particular trial will encompass using artificial lighting though, to supplement the daylight conditions to see what kind of results we get in that scenario. Of course, in Puerto Rico, they've got access to solar lighting at very inexpensive costs that you might not be able to see in Mexico, which would lend to why we're doing that. But I don't have a good answer for you, Zev, other than I would be hunting out and doing experimental plots with Chinese varieties is where I would go. I don't think any of the European varieties that I've seen thus far are going to be contenders in any way, shape, or form once you get that far south.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it. And keep up the great work.
Oh, thank you, Zev.
Awesome. Other question, let's see here. Collaboration. Oh, Chinese variety. You already spoke kind of about Texas A&M trial data showed that there were varieties Chinese were over 2.3% THC. Did you see any that were hot?
Yeah. So this year in our Bailey, Texas field, I believe we saw that the Yuma ran hot. But the Jinma was right at 0.3. So I think we're at 0.4 with the Yuma variety that we had and 0.3 with the Jinma. And then I'd have to go back and look, but I think we had one more area that we saw the Jinma and the Yuma achieve 4%, but I didn't see anything higher than 4%. And I saw the French varieties were all very, very low, less than 1% most of the time.
Okay, great questions. Rusty has a question here is, which was better from your observation for fiber biomass, the dio or mono? Told you you're in a hot seat.
Yeah, I'd hate to answer without getting my measurements back. I don't know. I I will say that all of our study, once we get these results, we are going to put them out to the public. We're not going to charge for any of this publication. So I will get back to everybody on that, and we can take a look and see what that looks like. I just don't know.
Okay, any other questions? Anybody else have anything that they like? Did you see THCV or CBDV in the UMA?
Honestly, didn't analyze for either of those. I'd be happy to pull the COAs and get back to you to see what that looked like. But they weren't things that I was really looking for. I was mainly scanning for whether it was hot or not, and then what the CBD content was, only because I saw a couple varieties. I saw some interesting spikes with CBDA that I didn't anticipate seeing.
Awesome. Tony, great questions. And Daryl, I second what you just said. I agree. Anybody else? David, I saw your camera came on. Do you have anything you want to add?
I apologize. The last 12 minutes, my internet went out, so I missed the meat and potatoes of it. But Andrew, thank you for putting everything together. That was great to see. And I'll just have to pick your brain for the last little bit, unless it was recorded, Mandy, you can email it to me. But I did miss about the last 12 minutes.
Yes, so great point. And for those of you that don't know, these are published. We record them, transcribe them. All of the notes from the chat are added into the transcribe notes, and they're available on Hemp Hallway. I also publish some of these or most of these on YouTube. And so you can go onto our YouTube channel. There's about 150 or 200 hours of recorded meetings there and 400 plus in Hemp Hallway. So I encourage you guys to please get signed up in Hemp Hallway. It's actually going down for maintenance here at the end of this week, maybe. Just a heads up, but then it will be back up and running. Everything will be on there. We're really working on engagement and getting people involved and participating. For those of you that you have not been on yet, feel free to log on. There's lots of connections. And then again, another tool for you to connect outside of these meetings to really advance conversations. Andrew, if people want to get a hold of you and connect, how do they get in touch with you? And what is your next step as an organization?
Well, two great questions. So I would go to bishenterprise.com or hempharvestworks.com. There's a contact us form. You can find me on LinkedIn. Otherwise, my email, andrew.bish@bishcom.com. Those are all easy ways to get a hold of me. I'm a little bit slow at LinkedIn, so if you message me there, I apologize. I'm not, my phone doesn't alert me to those things. What's next?
Because you're busy. You're so busy. You're doing a lot.
What's next? We're finishing up our measurement on these the fiber, getting these measurements, and then we're looking at the farm plan for this next year, as well as working with some of these great organizations and looking at how we can set up a larger scale test trial throughout the United States with more varieties in more geographic regions, and working on how we can share that. So those are some of the things that are up next relative to the seeds. And then, like I mentioned, we're currently working on building out some decortication equipment and setting up an additional processing facility in the state of Colorado right now to help break down some of this material and provide material to the marketplace.
Love it. I'm excited. So I saw, Joseph, your camera came on. I don't know if you have anything you want to add. Feel free. You're on mute right now, sir. You're good?
I'm a Johnny come lately. I'm on the outskirts of hemp. I am trying to make a hemp skin replacement for wound healing.
Okay.
Right now, I have a company commercializing human skin made from soy protein, and I'm trying to mesh hemp and soy to get into dermatology and wound healing and burns. So I'm a little bit of a late and odd person for this conversation.
Oh no, this is what feeds right into your business, right? We've got to have this part. We've got to take care of our farmers so that we can use the hemp on the downstream. And so I actually have a great connection for you that I'd love to connect you with. Kayla, I don't know if she was on. She's been working with a group that is extracting the proteins and utilizing them in healthcare. And so I would definitely love to connect you there. And I know there's lots of others. So
I did my first research with a small grant from the United Soybean Bureau, and we proved that we heal without leaving a scar. So we're pretty excited.
Hey, very exciting. Okay, well, I want to learn more. And anybody, so feel free again to drop your chat or your contact information, you guys. Reach out. Andrew, I appreciate you very much. There's lots of shout outs here. Thank you very much for the great presentation. Thanks for everything that you're doing. And everybody else, if you guys need anything, don't hesitate to reach out to me. We've got a great team that are working to support and make connections for you. Tomorrow is our networking meeting at 11 o'clock. It's where we get together, we break off into small groups. It's my favorite. I have a love-hate relationship with this one because I miss out on talking to everybody, but it's definitely the most popular and we get a ton of great feedback. But it really is your opportunity to talk for with 5 or 6 people for 20 minutes. Then we come back together and break off again into another small group. But it gives you that chance to build a network. So I invite all of you to come back tomorrow for that. You can find that on hemphallway.com or on our website, as well as on our LinkedIn page to register. Other than that, we'll see you guys another time. Please sign up for the local hemp association. And thank you very much, Andrew. Thank you for everybody else who's supporting what we're doing and everyone that's been involved in this project specifically. Hello, Klaus. Thank you. Liam, thank you. It's good to see you. Thanks, Karen.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. My computer's freezing right as we're talking. So all I can see is pictures and no names now. Anyways, thank you so much, you guys. Have a good day.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.